Now let's proceed to talk about the featured daily boss. You will be fighting the leader of the Midnight Sun, Licht. He is a red attacker mage. Before I go through the upgraded skill effect and extra passive, let me go through his base kit first. His skill 1 is a single target attacking ability. Upon attacking, he grant himself a 5% increased speed buff. The buff can stack up to 4 times. It will also inflict continuous bleed damage on the enemy for 2 turns. His skill 2 is another single target attacking ability. If increased speed is present on himself, he will grant a defense penetration level 2 buff upon attacking. If not, it will grant himself a 10% increased speed buff for a turn. Similar to other skill 2, the ability has 3 turn cooldown phase. His special is an AoE attacking ability. It will inflict continuous bleed damage on all the enemies for 2 turns. If Licht has 2 or more stacks of increased speed, he will instantly activates continuous damage inflict on the enemy. Usually continuous damage is activated when the affected target takes his or her turn. For every instances of continuous bleed inflicted on the enemy, the attack will be triggered after inflicting 25% increased damage taken buff. He has a special passive. For every increased speed present on himself, he will attacks after granting a 10% increased damage dealt buff. If at least one target enemy is taking continuous bleed damage, he will gain a 20% increased mobility buff. Like other bosses, he is immune to silence, total silence and status ailments such as stun or freeze. He is also immune to reduced mobility, mobility depletion, and reduced speed. On top of his default skill abilities and passive, he will also gain an upgraded skill effect or extra passive. This will change from day to day of the boss fights. For today's boss buff, these are the following effects. Upon attacking the affected target that has been inflicted with continuous bleed damage with his skill 1, it will inflict continuous bleed damage on other enemies, except the one who is already taking continuous bleed damage for 2 turns. Upon attacking the affected target that has been inflicted with continuous bleed damage with his skill 2, it will inflict a extended bleed duration by 1 turn debuff on the target. Upon using his special, it will trigger barrier removal on any enemy that has active barrier buff. As you go higher the difficulty level, he will gain extra passive. From part 4 onwards, he will inflict 75% reduced damage taken debuff on enemy whose HP is equal or less than 50. From part 7 onwards, upon using a skill, if the enemy's mobility is equal to or higher than 50%, attacks after inflicting 15% increased damage taken debuff on them. For part 10, if there are at least 4 increased speed buffs present on himself, upon attacking, he will inflict silence on the enemy for a turn. The 2 boosted mages for today is Ceremony Luck and Party Costume Noel. This is an ultra restrictive fight as you need 2 key utility to handle the boss mechanics, damage over time immunity and buff dispel. For buff dispel, you can use Rill, Lotus, Party Nozzle, Third Area, Spatial Mage Finral or the featured boosted mage, Party Costume Noel. For damage over time immunity, you can use Grey or Swimsuit Gauche. If you want to go with damage over time's instance removal instead, you can use Swimsuit Charmy, Party Mimosa or Clover Academy Noel. With the mechanics explained, let me proceed with my run showcase.
It's the end. That's the strength of our bond!
It's the end. Yeah.